All right, with problem 3, I don't think it really matters which side you start with because they both have cotangents and cosecants in them. So let's start with the left side. I would probably put everything in terms of sine and cosine. So cosecant is 1 over the sine. Cotangent is cosine over the sine. And then we have this complex fraction. So to get rid of the complex fraction, I need to multiply by the least common denominator, which in this case is just sine over sine. Now, some of you, when you're writing this, are having a little bit of trouble figuring out what cancels. So I kind of gave you the hint for some of you is to say, instead of just writing it as sine over sine, write it as sine over 1 times sine over 1. That way it can kind of help you to see what, when you're multiplying, what cancels. So when you take 1 over sine times sine over 1, the sines will cancel, you're left with 1. When you take sine times negative 1, you're left with minus sine. And in the denominator, the sines now will cancel. It's a little bit easier to see that they cancel, so you're left with cosine. All right, so I'm trying to get to, though, cotangent in the numerator over cosecant plus 1. So I want 2 terms in the bottom, but I want 1 term on the top. So when you look at that, you think, okay, how can I go from 2 terms to 1 term? Well, remember we talked about that. Anytime you're going from more terms and you're trying to get down to less, sometimes it's helpful to multiply by the conjugate. So let's see if that works. 1 plus sine over 1 plus sine. Now realize I have not done these problems yet, so I am just kind of thinking along as I go. If we decide we need to change something, we may have to do that, but that's the things I think of when I look at this. Like, I want to go to 1 term, so I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. So I'm going to get 1 minus sine squared when you multiply by the conjugate, and if you need to FOIL that out, you can, but you should see that the middle term drops out. And in the denominator, I have this cosine plus sine cosine. I'll have to FOIL it out. I don't know if we need to leave it factored, but for now I think I'm just going to FOIL that out. So I just took cosine times 1 and cosine times sine. I need to get this to be 1 term, and now I see that 1 minus sine squared is the same thing as cosine squared. So I'm going to write that as cosine squared theta, cosine theta plus sine cosine. And now I'm looking to see, what could I do to simplify this? I do see that there is a cosine common to all of them. So if I wanted to leave that factored, I possibly could. I had FOILed it out up on this step. I took cosine plus cosine sine. So now I'm thinking that maybe I should have left that as just cosine times cosine sine, because I have this cosine squared on top. So I'm going to just erase this. That's why it's nice to use pencil, not pen. All right, and so then I'm going to do cosine times 1 plus sine. I'm going to leave it like that, because now I see if I leave it like that, one of the cosines cancel out. So I'm still not where I want to be, but I do have 1 term on the top. Oops, cosine. I have 1 term on the top, which is cosine, over 1 plus sine on the bottom. So at least now I have the right number of terms. It doesn't match where I'm trying to get to, but I have the right number of terms. So that's always a key when you look at this and say, I want to go from like 2 terms on the top to 1 term. First thing we did is we thought, well, let's get everything in terms of sine and cosine. So we did that. Would we have needed to do that? Maybe not. Maybe we could have multiplied by the conjugate right up there. But I sometimes like to get everything in terms of sine and cosine. Once we did, and we realized that we had 1 term on the bottom, we wanted to get to 2, and 2 terms on the top, we wanted to get to 1, that was the key to say, well, let's multiply by the conjugate of the numerator. That way we can get that down to 1 term. So we did that. Now it didn't come down to 1 term here, but we can replace 1 minus sine squared with cosine squared. And then once I realized that a cosine was going to drop out, I thought we'd better leave that as a factored form in the denominator, and one of the cosines drop out. So we're still not where we want to get to. We want to get to cotangent. Cotangent is cosine over sine. Cosecant is 1 over sine. So when I think about where I'm trying to go to, it makes me realize that what I need to do is just multiply by 1 over sine over itself. I'm just multiplying by a form of 1. So when I do that, up here I'm going to get cosine over sine. over, here I'm going to get 1 over sine, plus, when I take sine times 1 over sine, the sines drop out, I'm left with 1. So what does that equal? It equals the cotangent over cosecant plus 1. And that's where I was trying to get to. So when I got to at least having the right number of terms, then I looked at where I was trying to go. And to get to cotangent, I had to divide this by sine. To get to cosecant, I had to divide that by sine. And when I divide sine by sine, I got the one that I needed. Okay, so that was the third problem.